Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. The crystal champagne flute felt cold in my hand as I surveyed the opulent living room of Carlton Bolton's mansion. Laughter and chatter filled the air, mixing with the soft jazz playing in the background. I took a sip, the bubbles dancing on my tongue as I tried to quell the unease in my stomach. "Raymond, darling, there you are." Shelley's voice cut through the noise as she glided towards me, her red dress hugging her curves. She placed a manicured hand on my arm, her touch light but possessive. "I've been looking everywhere for you." I forced a smile. "Just getting some air, dear. It's rather crowded in here." Shelley's lips curved into a pout. "You're not trying to hide, are you? This is an important night for us. Carlton's been asking about you." "I'm not hiding," I said, keeping my tone even. "I just needed a moment." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but her smile remained fixed. "Well, come along then. We should mingle." As Shelley led me through the throng of guests, I couldn't help but feel like a prized show dog being paraded around. I nodded and smiled at familiar faces, exchanging pleasantries with colleagues and their spouses. Shelley was in her element, her laughter ringing out as she charmed everyone around her. "Raymond, there's my star analyst," Carlton boomed, clapping me on the shoulder. His face was flushed, likely from the expensive scotch in his hand. "Glad you could make it. How are you enjoying the party?" "It's wonderful, sir," I replied, plastering on my best corporate smile. "Thank you for inviting us." Carlton waved his hand dismissively. "Nonsense. You're family now, Raymond. Your work has been exceptional this quarter. I have big plans for you, my boy." Shelley beamed, squeezing my arm. "That's wonderful news, isn't it, darling?" I nodded, feeling the weight of expectation settle on my shoulders. "I appreciate the opportunity, sir. I'll continue to do my best for the company." As Carlton launched into a story about his latest golf outing, I let my eyes wander around the room. That's when I saw her. She stood near the fireplace, engaged in conversation with a small group. Her emerald green dress was elegant but understated, a stark contrast to the flashy outfits surrounding her. What caught my attention, however, was her smile, genuine and warm, reaching her eyes in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Raymond?" Shelley's voice snapped me back to the present. "Carlton asked you a question." I blinked, turning back to my boss. "I'm sorry, sir. Could you repeat that?" Carlton chuckled. "No worries, my boy. I was just asking about the Henderson account. How's that coming along?" I launched into a brief overview of the project, grateful for the distraction. As I spoke, I couldn't help but glance back at the woman by the fireplace. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I felt a jolt of electricity run through me. "Excuse me," a soft voice interrupted as I finished my explanation. I turned to find the woman from the fireplace standing beside us. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing. Are you talking about the Henderson merger?" Carlton's eyes lit up. "Indeed we are. Raymond here is heading up the financial analysis. And you are?" "Elizabeth Chambers," she said, extending her hand. "I'm with the legal team working on the merger. It's a pleasure to meet you all." As we shook hands, I felt a warmth spread through me. "Raymond Norton," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "It's great to finally put a face to the name. Your work on the contract has been invaluable." Elizabeth smiled, and I found myself captivated by the intelligence in her eyes. "Thank you. I've been impressed by your financial projections as well. I was hoping we could discuss a few points I had questions about, if you have a moment." Before I could respond, Shelley's arm snaked around my waist. "I'm sure Raymond would be happy to schedule a meeting during work hours," she said, her tone sweet but with an underlying edge. "We wouldn't want to bore everyone with shop talk at a party, would we?" I felt a flicker of annoyance at Shelley's interruption but kept my expression neutral. "Actually, I'd be happy to discuss it now, if you don't mind, dear. Carlton, would you excuse us for a moment?" Carlton waved us off, already engrossed in conversation with another guest. I led Elizabeth to a quieter corner of the room, acutely aware of Shelley's eyes following us. "I apologize for my wife," I said softly as we found a spot near a window. "She can be a bit protective." Elizabeth shook her head, her smile understanding. "No need to apologize. I appreciate you taking the time to talk. I've been going over the numbers for the tech division, and I had a few concerns about the projected growth rates. As we delved into the intricacies of the merger, I found myself relaxing for the first time that evening. Elizabeth's insights were sharp, her questions thoughtful. We bounced ideas back and forth, losing track of time as we worked through potential scenarios. I have to say, it's refreshing to work with someone who really understands the nuances of these deals, I said, leaning against the window frame. Most people's eyes glaze over when I start talking about market projections and risk assessments. Elizabeth laughed, the sound warm and genuine. I could say the same about contract law. It's nice to have a conversation where I don't have to dumb things down. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the noise of the party faded away. I felt a connection I hadn't experienced in years, not just intellectual, but something deeper, more profound. The spell was broken by Shelley's voice, sharp and cutting. "Raymond, darling, I think it's time we headed home. I'm feeling a bit tired." I turned to see my wife standing behind us, her smile tight and her eyes cold. "Of course, dear," I said, straightening up. "Elizabeth, it was a pleasure. I'll email you about setting up a proper meeting to discuss those projections further." Elizabeth nodded, her professional mask sliding back into place. "Absolutely. It was nice meeting you both. Enjoy the rest of your evening." As we made our way to the coat check, I could feel the tension radiating off Shelley. She remained silent until we were in the car, the privacy screen up between us and the driver. "Well, you certainly seem to be enjoying yourself," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I don't think I've ever seen you so animated at a party before." I kept my eyes on the road ahead. "We were discussing work, Shelley. It's important for the merger." She scoffed. "Please. I saw the way you were looking at her. Do you think I'm blind?" "You're being ridiculous," I said, my jaw clenching. "Elizabeth is a colleague, nothing more." Shelley turned to face me, her eyes flashing. "Just remember who got you where you are, Raymond. Don't forget what's important." As we rode home in tense silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The facade of our perfect life was beginning to crack, and I wasn't sure I wanted to patch it up this time. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and strained silences at home. I threw myself into the Henderson merger, using it as an excuse to avoid confronting the growing tension with Shelley. Our interactions had become a carefully choreographed dance of polite small talk and avoiding any real conversation. It was during a late night at the office that I first heard the whispers. I was heading to the break room for another cup of coffee when I overheard two junior analysts gossiping by the water cooler. "Did you see Mrs. Norton at the charity gala last week?" one of them said, her voice low and conspiratorial. "She was all over Brandon Evans. I thought her husband was going to explode." I froze, my hand on the door handle. The other analyst chuckled. "Please, everyone knows she's been fooling around for years. Norton's either blind or doesn't care." Their laughter faded as they walked away, leaving me standing there, my mind reeling. I'd heard rumors before, of course, but I'd always dismissed them as office gossip. Now, the seed of doubt that had been planted at Carlton's party began to grow. Over the next few days, I found myself watching Shelley more closely. I noticed the way she guarded her phone, the hushed conversations that ended abruptly when I entered a room. The pieces were starting to fit together, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. It was time to get some answers. "Luther McIntosh Investigations," a gruff voice answered on the third ring. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Mr. McIntosh? This is Raymond Norton. I need your services." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What kind of services are we talking about, Mr. Norton?" "I need you to follow my wife," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "I think she might be involved with someone else." Luther's voice softened slightly. "I see. Why don't you come by my office tomorrow morning? We can discuss the details in person." The next day, I sat across from Luther in his cramped office, the smell of stale coffee and cigarettes hanging in the air. He was a stocky man with a face that had seen its fair share of trouble, but his eyes were kind as he listened to my suspicions. "I'll need some basic information," Luther said, pulling out a notepad. "Your wife's schedule, any patterns you've noticed, names of people you're concerned about. The more I have to work with, the faster I can get you answers." I nodded, swallowing hard. There's one name in particular. Brandon Evans. He's a businessman, known for his aggressive tactics. I've seen them together at events, and there's been talk. Luther jotted down the information, his expression neutral. All right, Mr. Norton. I'll get started right away. I should have some preliminary information for you in a few days. As I left Luther's office, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Part of me hoped I was wrong, that this was all a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew the truth was about to come crashing down around me. 3 days later, my phone rang as I was leaving the office. Mr. Norton? It's Luther. I think you should come by. I have something you need to see. My heart pounded as I made my way to the investigator's office. Luther met me at the door. I'm sorry, Mr. Norton. I wish I had better news for you. He led me to his desk, where a laptop sat open. I've been following your wife for the past few days. She's been meeting Brandon Evans at a hotel downtown. I have photos and video evidence of their encounters. Luther hit play on a video file, and I watched in stunned silence as Shelley and Brandon embraced in the hotel lobby, their kisses passionate and familiar. My stomach churned as I saw them disappear into an elevator together. There's more, Luther said softly, handing me a file. Financial records, text messages I was able to recover. It looks like this has been going on for at least a year, possibly longer. I flipped through the pages, each one a fresh blow. Credit card statements showing lavish gifts, intimate text messages discussing their rendezvous, even plans for a weekend getaway. My vision blurred as the reality of the situation sank in. What do you want to do next, Mr. Norton? Luther asked, his voice pulling me back to the present. I closed the file. I want everything. Every photo, every video, every scrap of evidence. And I want to confront her tonight. Luther nodded, understanding in his eyes. I'll put it all together for you. Just be careful, all right? These situations can get ugly fast. As I drove home that evening, the file of evidence sitting heavy on the passenger seat, I felt a storm of emotions brewing inside me. Anger, betrayal, humiliation, they swirled together, fueling a determination I hadn't felt in years. Shelley had made a fool of me, but no more. It was time to shatter the illusion of our perfect life once and for all. I pulled into our driveway, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. The house was quiet as I entered, the only sound the clicking of Shelley's heels on the hardwood floor as she came to greet me. You're home late, she said, her tone casual but with an underlying tension. Busy day at the office? I met her gaze, my voice steady. We need to talk, Shelley. Now. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she followed me into the living room. I set the file on the coffee table between us, watching as recognition and then fear flashed across her face. What's this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I opened the file, spreading out photos of her and Brandon. Why don't you tell me? Or better yet, why don't you explain to me how long you've been fucking Brandon Evans behind my back? Shelley's mask of innocence crumbled, replaced by a look of defiance. How dare you have me followed? What I do in my private time is none of your business. I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. None of my business? You're my wife, Shelley. Or have you forgotten that in between your little trysts with Brandon? She stood up, her eyes flashing with anger. Oh, please, don't act so high and mighty, Raymond. You've been so caught up in your precious work, you barely even notice me anymore. What did you expect me to do? I expected you to be faithful. I shouted, my composure finally breaking. I expected you to honor our vows, to talk to me if you were unhappy, not sneak around like a common whore. Shelley's hand connected with my cheek, the slap echoing in the room. Don't you dare call me that, she hissed. You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I've been sleeping with Brandon. And you know what? He makes me feel alive. He's exciting, passionate, everything you're not. I rubbed my cheek, my anger cooling into something harder, more dangerous. How long? She shrugged, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Does it matter? A year, maybe more. Long enough to know that Brandon is twice the man you'll ever be. And I suppose all those business dinners, all those late nights at the office, those were just cover for your little affair? I asked, my voice low and controlled. Shelley laughed, the sound grating on my nerves. Oh, Raymond, you're so naive. Did you really think I was interested in your boring financial talk? I was building connections, setting us up for a better life. Brandon understands ambition. He knows how to take what he wants. I stood up, towering over her. And what exactly were you planning, Shelley? To leave me for him once you'd squeezed every last drop of status and money out of our marriage? She met my gaze, unflinching. Maybe, or maybe I would have kept you both. After all, you've been so easy to fool all these years. Always trusting, always believing the best in me. It's almost sad, really. Something snapped inside me at her words. In that moment, I saw Shelley for who she truly was, a manipulative, selfish creature who had been using me from the very beginning. All the love I had felt for her turned to ash, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Well, I'm afraid your little plan has come to an end, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I want you out of this house tonight. You'll be hearing from my lawyer in the morning. Shelley's eyes widened, the first hint of fear creeping into her expression. You can't be serious. Everything we've built, you're just going to throw it all away? I laughed, the sound devoid of humor. No, Shelley. You threw it all away the moment you decided to betray me. I'm just taking out the trash. She took a step towards me, her hand reaching out. Raymond, please. We can work this out. I'll end things with Brandon, I promise. We can go to counseling, start over. I caught her wrist before she could touch me, my grip firm. Save your lies for someone who still believes them. We're done, Shelley. Pack your things and get out. As I watched her rush upstairs, tears finally breaking through her composed facade, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The sound of Shelley's sobs faded as she disappeared upstairs. I stood in the living room, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal, feeling a strange mix of emptiness and resolve. The life we had built together was crumbling, but I refused to be buried in the rubble. I pulled out my phone, dialing a familiar number. Terrence? It's Raymond. I need your help. Ray? What's going on? You sound off. Terrence's concerned voice came through the line. Shelley's been cheating on me. With Brandon Evans, I said, my voice steady. I'm kicking her out tonight. Can you come over? There was a brief pause before Terrence replied, his tone hardening. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't do anything stupid before I get there. True to his word, Terrence arrived shortly after, his face a mask of concern and anger. As I let him in, I could hear Shelley still moving around upstairs, the occasional thud of a suitcase punctuating her muffled sobs. Jesus, Ray, Terrence said, taking in the scattered photos on the coffee table. How long has this been going on? I shook my head, pouring us both a generous measure of scotch. At least a year, maybe longer. I've been such a fool, Terrence. Terrence clasped my shoulder, his grip firm. You're not the fool here, Ray. She's the one who threw away a good man for that snake Evans. We sat in silence for a moment, the reality of the situation settling over us. Finally, Terrence spoke up, his voice low and determined. What's your plan? You know I've got your back, whatever you need. I took a long sip of scotch, feeling the burn in my throat. First, I'm getting her out of this house. Then, I'm going to destroy them both. They want to play games? Fine. Let's see how they like it when I start playing for keeps. Terrence nodded, a smile on his face. That's the Ray I know. We'll make them regret ever crossing you. The sound of heels on the stairs interrupted our conversation. Shelley appeared. Mascara streaked down her face, pulling 2 large suitcases behind her. I hope you're happy, Raymond, she spat, her eyes flashing with anger and hurt. Throwing away years of marriage over one little indiscretion. I stood, facing her with cold determination. One little indiscretion? Is that what you call fucking another man for over a year? Save your excuses, Shelley. They mean nothing to me now. Shelley's gaze flicked to Terrence, her lip curling in disgust. I see you've already called in the cavalry. Always hiding behind your friends, aren't you, Raymond? Terrence took a step forward, his voice low. I'd watch your mouth if I were you, Shelley. You're not in a position to be throwing stones right now. I held up a hand, stopping Terrence. It's not worth it. She's not worth it. I turned back to Shelley, my voice devoid of emotion. Your things will be sent to wherever you end up. I suggest you leave now before I decide to air our dirty laundry to everyone we know. For a moment, I saw a flicker of fear in Shelley's eyes. Then, her mask of indifference slipped back into place. This isn't over, Raymond. You'll regret this. As the door slammed behind her, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Terrence clapped me on the back, his voice filled with satisfaction. Good riddance. Now, let's talk about how we're going to make them pay. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and sleepless nights. I threw myself into my work, using it as a shield against the pitying looks and whispered gossip that seemed to follow me everywhere. The news of Shelley's affair and our impending divorce had spread through our social circle like wildfire, and I found myself withdrawing more and more. One particularly grueling day at the office, I was hunched over my desk, poring over financial reports, when a soft knock at my door broke my concentration. Mr. Norton? Elizabeth's voice was hesitant. I'm sorry to disturb you, but I wanted to check if you had a moment to go over the Henderson merger details. I looked up, feeling a twinge of guilt at the concern in her eyes. I'd been avoiding her since the night of the party, unsure of how to navigate our budding friendship in the wake of my personal crisis. Of course, Elizabeth, I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. Please come in. As she settled into the seat, I couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between her genuine warmth and Shelley's calculated charm. Elizabeth's presence seemed to lift some of the heaviness that had settled over me in recent weeks. I heard about what happened, Elizabeth said softly, her eyes meeting mine. I'm so sorry, Raymond. If there's anything I can do. I shook my head, forcing a smile. Thank you, but I'm fine. It's better this way, really. Now, what did you want to discuss about the merger? Elizabeth hesitated for a moment, then nodded, pulling out a file. As we delved into the intricacies of the deal, I felt some of the tension drain from my body. Here, in the world of numbers and projections, I was on solid ground. Our discussion was interrupted by my phone buzzing insistently. I glanced at the screen, my jaw clenching as I saw Terrence's name. I'm sorry, I need to take this, I said, standing up. Terrence? What's going on? Terrence's voice was tight with anger. Ray, you need to get down to the country club. Now. What? Why? What's happening? I asked, already reaching for my jacket. It's Shelley and Brandon, Terrence spat. They're here, making a scene. Brandon's running his mouth about how he's going to take over your accounts, how you're finished in this town. It's bad, Ray. I felt a cold fury wash over me. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Don't let them leave. Hanging up, I turned to Elizabeth, who was watching me with concern. I'm sorry, but I have to go. There's a situation I need to handle. Elizabeth stood, her expression determined. Let me come with you. You shouldn't have to face this alone. For a moment, I hesitated. Then, remembering Shelley's cruel words about my reliance on others, I nodded. All right, but I warn you, it's not going to be pretty. The drive to the country club was tense, filled with Elizabeth's quiet support and my own roiling emotions. As we pulled into the parking lot, I could see a small crowd gathered near the entrance. Stepping out of the car, I straightened my tie and took a deep breath. Ready? I asked Elizabeth. She nodded, her presence steadying. Right behind you. As we approached, I could hear Brandon's voice, loud and mocking. And then poor Raymond, he had no idea. Some financial genius he is, can't even see what's happening right under his nose. The crowd parted as we approached, whispers and stares following in our wake. Shelley was the first to spot us, her eyes widening in surprise before narrowing in defiance. Well, well, she drawled, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Look who decided to join the party. Hello, darling. And who's this? Your new plaything? I felt Elizabeth stiffen beside me, but I kept my focus on Shelley and Brandon. I think you've had enough to drink, Shelley. Why don't you and your friend call it a night? Brandon stepped forward, his chest puffed out like a peacock. Or what, Norton? You going to cry to Daddy Carlton about it? Face it, you're finished in this town. Your wife, your clients, they're all coming to me now. I laughed, the sound cold and humorless. Is that what you think, Brandon? That you've won? Let me tell you something. I stepped closer. You have no idea what you've started. By the time I'm done with you, you'll be lucky if you can get a job flipping burgers. Brandon's face flushed with anger. You threatening me, Norton? Big mistake. It's not a threat, I said, my calm demeanor a stark contrast to his blustering. It's a promise. Enjoy your little victory lap while you can. Because from this moment on, your life is going to become a living hell. I turned to the stunned onlookers, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this unseemly display. I assure you, it won't happen again. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have more important matters to attend to than entertaining these individuals. With that, I offered my arm to Elizabeth and turned to leave. As we walked away, I could hear the murmur of the crowd, the shocked whispers and speculative glances. Raymond, Elizabeth said softly as we reached the car. Are you all right? I took a deep breath, feeling the last of my restraint crumble. No, I'm not all right, but I will be. They want a war? I'll give them a war they'll never forget. As we drove away from the country club, leaving Shelley and Brandon to deal with the aftermath of their spectacle, I felt a newfound resolve settle over me. The time for playing nice was over. From now on, I was going to fight fire with fire. The morning after the country club incident, I sat in my home office, surrounded by files and laptops. The events of the past few weeks had left me raw, but that pain was rapidly crystallizing into something harder, more focused. As I sipped my coffee, a knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Come in, I called. Knowing who it would be, Terrence entered, followed by two people I didn't recognize, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a woman whose fingers never seemed to stop moving over her phone. Ray, Terrence said, his voice tight with determination. I'd like you to meet Luther McIntosh and Susan Chun. They're here to help us, even the odds. I stood, extending my hand to each of them in turn. Luther, Susan, thank you for coming. Terrence has filled you in on the situation? Luther nodded, his gravelly voice matching his rough appearance. He has. Gotta say, Mr. Norton, you've got yourself quite the mess here, but I've dealt with worse. We'll get you what you need. Susan finally looked up from her phone, her eyes gleaming with a predatory intelligence. I've already started digging into Evan's digital footprint. Let's just say, he's not as careful as he thinks he is. I gestured for them all to sit. Good. Because what I have in mind is going to require all of our skills. Shelley and Brandon think they've won, that they've humiliated me and can just walk away. I intend to show them just how wrong they are. Terrence leaned forward, his expression intense. What's the plan, Ray? Whatever it is, I'm in. I pulled out a file, spreading photos and documents across the desk. First, we go after Brandon's business. Luther, I need you to dig deeper into his past deals, his clients, anything we can use. Susan, I want you to focus on his digital presence emails, financial records, anything that might be less than legal. Luther nodded, already jotting down notes. I've got some contacts in the business world who owe me favors. I'll start there. Susan's fingers flew over her phone. I can have his emails by the end of the day. Financial records might take a bit longer, but not much. I turned to Terrence. I need you to be my eyes and ears at the office. Brandon's been trying to poach my clients. I want to know every move he makes, every meeting he takes. Terrence's jaw set in determination. Consider it done. That snake won't be able to sneeze without us knowing about it. As we delved deeper into the plan, I felt a surge of energy I hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice, about showing Shelley and Brandon that their actions had consequences. Hours passed as we refined our strategy, each person bringing their unique skills to the table. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, I stood up, stretching out the kinks in my back. All right, team, I said, my voice filled with satisfaction. Let's get to work. Brandon Evans won't know what hit him. Over the next few weeks, our plan began to take shape. Luther's investigations uncovered a web of questionable deals and disgruntled former partners, all ripe for exploitation. Susan's hacking skills proved invaluable, providing us with a treasure trove of incriminating emails and financial records. One evening, as I pored over the latest batch of information, my phone buzzed with a text from Terrence. Meeting with Harrington Corp tomorrow. Evans thinks he's got it in the bag. Time to make our move? I smiled, feeling a rush of anticipation. Do it, I texted back. Let's see how Brandon handles a little competition. The next day, I walked into the Harrington Corp offices, projecting an air of calm confidence that I didn't entirely feel. As I approached the receptionist, I caught sight of Brandon exiting the conference room, his face flushed with what I assumed was premature victory. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross his face. I gave him a small, knowing smile before turning to the receptionist. Raymond Norton for Mr. Harrington, I said smoothly. I believe he's expecting me. Brandon's voice, tinged with barely contained anger, came from behind me. Norton? What the hell are you doing here? I turned, raising an eyebrow. Business, Brandon. You understand how that works, don't you? Or do you need me to explain it to you? Before he could respond, Mr. Harrington himself emerged from the conference room. Ah, Raymond. Right on time. Come in, come in. We have much to discuss. As I followed Mr. Harrington into the room, I couldn't resist throwing one last barb over my shoulder. Better luck next time, Brandon. Maybe try not to lead with promises you can't keep. The door closed behind us, cutting off Brandon's sputtered protests. Mr. Harrington settled into his chair, fixing me with a keen gaze. I must say, Raymond, your timing is impeccable, he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Mr. Evans was just here, making some rather ambitious claims about his ability to handle our account. I leaned forward, my voice filled with quiet confidence. Mr. Harrington, I'm not here to make grand promises or inflate my capabilities. What I can offer you is a track record of success, a deep understanding of your industry, and a commitment to transparency that I believe Mr. Evans lacks. For the next hour, we delved into the specifics of the Harrington account. I laid out my strategy, backing up each point with solid data and realistic projections. By the time we shook hands at the end of the meeting, I could see the decision in Mr. Harrington's eyes. Well, Raymond, he said, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, I think we have ourselves a deal. I look forward to working with you. As I left the Harrington offices, I spotted Brandon pacing in the lobby, his face a mask of barely contained rage. Our eyes met, and I saw the moment he realized what had happened. This isn't over, Norton, he hissed as I passed him. You have no idea who you're messing with. I paused, turning to face him fully. Oh, I think I do, Brandon. The question is, do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're the one who's in over his head. With that, I walked out, leaving Brandon to stew in his defeat. As I got into my car, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. This was just the beginning, but already I could feel the balance of power shifting. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. You're going to want to see this. Evan's emails are a goldmine. How soon can you meet? I smiled, feeling a surge of anticipation. On my way, I texted back. The next phase of our plan was about to begin, and I couldn't wait to see Brandon's face when he realized just how deep a hole he dug for himself. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. With each passing day, we tightened the noose around Brandon and Shelley's necks, systematically dismantling the life they thought they'd secured. Susan's tech wizardry proved invaluable as we began to unravel Brandon's digital life. Late one night, huddled around my home office desk, Susan's eyes gleamed with triumph as she turned her laptop to face us. Look at this, she said, pointing to a series of emails. Brandon's been cooking the books for years. He's been inflating his company's profits to attract investors and secure loans. I leaned in, a slow smile spreading across my face. This is perfect. Luther, can you verify these numbers? Luther nodded, already scribbling notes. Give me a day or two. I'll cross-reference with my contacts in the banking sector. If this checks out, we've got him by the balls. Terrence clapped me on the shoulder. What's our next move, Ray? I straightened up, my mind racing with possibilities. We leak this information to the right people. Not all at once, mind you. We'll start with whispers, plant seeds of doubt in his investors' minds. Susan's fingers flew over her keyboard. I can create some anonymous accounts, start spreading rumors on financial forums. It'll look like insider knowledge. Good, I nodded. Luther, once you've verified the numbers, reach out to your contact at the SEC. Don't give them everything, just enough to start an investigation. Luther grinned, a predatory gleam in his eye. They've been itching to nail Evans for years. This'll light a fire under them. As we fine-tuned our plan, I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. Brandon had thought he could take everything from me, but he was about to learn a harsh lesson in consequences. Over the next few weeks, our plan unfolded with devastating precision. Whispers of financial irregularities began to circulate in Brandon's circles. His once confident swagger gave way to nervous glances and tense phone calls. One afternoon, as I was leaving a client meeting, I ran into Brandon in the lobby of our office building. The contrast between us was stark while I stood tall. Radiating confidence, Brandon looked haggard, his expensive suit rumpled and his eyes darting around nervously. "Norton," he spat, his voice a mix of anger and fear. "What have you done?" I raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "I'm not sure what you mean, Brandon. Having some trouble with your investors?" He stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. "I know you're behind this. These rumors, the SEC sniffing around. You think you can destroy me?" I met his gaze calmly. "Destroy you? Brandon, I'm not doing anything. If you're having problems, perhaps you should look at your own business practices. After all, there's no smoke without fire, is there?" Brandon's face contorted with rage. He grabbed my lapel, pulling me close. "You smug bastard. I'll ruin you for this." I calmly removed his hand, my voice ice cold. "I'd be careful if I were you, Brandon. Assaulting a colleague in broad daylight? Not a good look for a man already under scrutiny." As if on cue, several people in the lobby turned to stare at us. Brandon released me, his face flushing with embarrassment and anger. I straightened my jacket, my voice low enough for only him to hear. "You played with fire when you decided to go after what was mine, Brandon. Now you're getting burned. And trust me, this is just the beginning." Leaving him sputtering in the lobby, I walked out into the sunlight, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over me. The next phase of our plan was about to begin, and I couldn't wait to see Shelley's face when she realized her perfect new life was crumbling around her. That evening, I met with Terrence at our favorite bar, a quiet place where we could speak freely. "How'd it go with the Carlton today?" I asked, sipping my scotch. Terrence grinned. "Better than we could have hoped." I casually mentioned the rumors about Brandon's financial troubles. Carlton's eyes nearly popped out of his head. "He's worried about how it might affect the firm's reputation." I nodded, pleased. "Good. And Shelley?" "She's starting to panic," Terrence replied. "I overheard her on the phone with Brandon. She's worried about their lifestyle, asking him what's going on with their money." I leaned back, a cold smile playing on my lips. "Perfect. It's time to turn up the heat. Call Susan. Tell her to release the next batch of information." As we clinked glasses, I felt a surge of anticipation. Shelley and Brandon's perfect world was about to come crashing down, and I would be there to watch it burn. The day of the charity gala arrived, and with it, the culmination of our carefully orchestrated plan. Tonight, Shelley and Brandon would face the consequences of their actions in the most public way possible. "You ready for this?" Terrence asked, appearing in the doorway. I met his gaze in the mirror, my eyes hard with determination. "More than ready. Let's go." The ballroom of the Grand Hotel was a sea of glittering dresses and expensive suits. As we entered, I could feel the weight of eyes upon us, the whispers following in our wake. News of Brandon's financial troubles had spread like wildfire through our social circle, and everyone was eager to see how the drama would unfold. I spotted Shelley across the room, resplendent in a form-fitting red dress. Her smile was brittle as she clung to Brandon's arm, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Brandon, for his part, was trying to maintain his usual swagger, but I could see the strain in his face, the way his hand shook slightly as he reached for a champagne flute. "Showtime," I murmured to Terrence, making my way towards the stage where the charity auction was set to begin. As I passed Shelley and Brandon, I couldn't resist a small jab. Lovely evening, isn't it? I do hope you're planning to bid generously, Brandon. After all, it's for a good cause. Brandon's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, the MC called for everyone's attention. I took my place near the front of the crowd, Terrence at my side, as the auction began. The first few items went quickly, with polite applause following each sale. Then, the MC announced the next lot. Ladies and gentlemen, our next item is a weekend getaway at the exclusive Sunset Resort. We'll start the bidding at $5,000. I raised my paddle, my voice carrying clearly through the room. 10,000. A murmur went through the crowd. Brandon, unable to resist the challenge, called out, 15,000. I smiled, my voice calm. 20,000. The bidding continued, with Brandon growing more agitated with each raise. I could see Shelley tugging at his sleeve, whispering urgently in his ear, but he shook her off. 50,000, Brandon called, his voice strained. I paused for a moment, letting the tension build. Then, with a casual flick of my wrist, I raised my paddle. $100,000. The room fell silent. Brandon's face had gone pale, his jaw working as he struggled to find a response. Shelley's eyes were wide with panic. The MC, sensing the drama unfolding, quickly brought down the gavel. Sold. To Mr. Norton for $100,000. As applause broke out, I made my way to the stage to complete the transaction. As I passed Brandon and Shelley, I couldn't resist twisting the knife. Don't worry, I said softly. I'm sure you'll be able to afford a nice weekend away soon. Perhaps somewhere more budget-friendly? Shelley's face contorted with rage. You bastard, she hissed. What have you done? I raised an eyebrow, my voice low enough for only them to hear. Me? I haven't done anything. I'm just a concerned citizen, donating to charity. It's not my fault if some people can't keep up. Before they could respond, I continued to the stage. As I handed over my credit card, I caught sight of Carlton Bolton watching the scene unfold, his expression a mix of shock and growing understanding. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of whispers and sidelong glances. Brandon and Shelley tried to maintain their composure, but I could see them crumbling under the weight of scrutiny and speculation. As the gala wound down, I found myself cornered by Carlton near the bar. Raymond, he said, his voice low and serious. What's going on? These rumors about Brandon, and now this display. Are you behind all this? I met his gaze steadily. Carlton, I'm just a man trying to rebuild his life after a devastating betrayal. If certain truths are coming to light, well, that's hardly my fault, is it? Carlton studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I see. Well, I hope you know what you're doing, Raymond. These games can be dangerous. I smiled, raising my glass in a mock toast. Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing, Carlton, and I'm just getting started. As I left the gala that night, I caught sight of Shelley and Brandon engaged in a heated argument by the valet stand. Their voices carried across the quiet night air. What are we going to do? Shelley demanded, her voice shrill with panic. Everyone knows, Brandon. We're ruined. Brandon grabbed her arm, his face twisted with anger. Shut up. Just shut up and let me think. I watched as Shelley wrenched her arm free, tears streaming down her face. This is all your fault. You promised me everything, and now we have nothing. As their argument escalated, drawing the attention of nearby guests, I slipped into my car. The seeds of doubt and discord we had planted were bearing fruit, and I couldn't wait to see how they would continue to grow. The morning after the gala, I sat in my office, reviewing the fallout from the previous night's events. News of Brandon's financial troubles and the spectacle at the auction had spread like wildfire through our social and business circles. I allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction as I scrolled through the flood of emails and text messages. A knock at the door interrupted my reverie. Come in, I called, expecting to see Terrence or one of my team. Instead, a man I didn't recognize entered, his piercing blue eyes scanning the room before settling on me. He was tall, with a lean build and a face that spoke of hard years and harder decisions. Raymond Norton? He asked, his voice gravelly and low. I stood, my guard instantly up. Yes. And you are? The man closed the door behind him, then turned to face me fully. My name is John. John Reeves. And I believe we have a common enemy. My mind raced, trying to place the name. Then it hit me. John Reeves, Shelley's ex-lover, the one she had claimed was dead. John Reeves, I said slowly, studying him carefully. Last I heard, you were supposed to be at the bottom of the Pacific. A grim smile played across John's face. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated, as they say. May I sit? We have much to discuss. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, my mind whirling with possibilities. By all means. I'm curious to hear what a dead man has to say. John settled into the chair, his posture relaxed but alert. I've been watching you, Raymond. Your little campaign against Shelley and Brandon. I have to say, I'm impressed. And why would my actions interest a man who's supposed to be dead? I asked, leaning back in my chair. John's eyes hardened. Because Shelley and Brandon didn't just betray you, Raymond. They tried to kill me. I felt my eyebrows rise. That's quite an accusation, Mr. Reeves. Do you have proof? John reached into his jacket, pulling out a USB drive. More than proof. I have evidence that will bury them both. Financial records, emails, even a recorded conversation discussing how to deal with me. He placed the drive on my desk, his eyes never leaving mine. I've been biding my time, gathering information. But when I saw what you were doing, I realized we could help each other. I picked up the drive, turning it over in my hands. And why should I trust you? For all I know, this could be a trap. John leaned forward, his voice intense. Because I want to see them suffer as much as you do. They took everything from me, my business, my reputation, nearly my life. I've spent the last 2 years planning my revenge. With your resources and my information, we can destroy them completely. I studied John for a long moment, weighing my options. Finally, I nodded. All right, Mr. Reeves. Let's say I'm interested. What exactly do you propose? A predatory smile spread across John's face. I propose we finish what you've started. We use my evidence to not just ruin them financially, but to see them behind bars. Attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy, we have enough to put them away for decades. I felt a surge of excitement at the possibilities, but caution held me back. And what's in it for you, besides revenge? John's expression turned grim. Justice, Mr. Norton, and the chance to reclaim my life. Once they're exposed, I can come out of hiding, clear my name. I nodded slowly, my mind already racing with potential plans. I'll need to verify your information, of course, and discuss this with my team. Of course, John agreed, standing. Take your time, but not too much time. Shelley and Brandon are desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. As John left my office, I sat back, staring at the USB drive. This unexpected development could change everything. I reached for my phone, dialing Terrence's number. Terrence? Get the team together. We've got a new player in the game. On it, Terrence replied, his voice sharp with curiosity. What's going on, Ray? I'll explain everything when everyone's here. Just get them to my place as soon as possible. An hour later, my living room was filled with the tense energy of my team. Terrence paced by the window, while Susan perched on the edge of the couch, her laptop open and ready. Luther lounged in an armchair, his eyes shrewd as they followed my movements. All right, Ray, Terrence said, breaking the silence. What's this all about? I took a deep breath, then launched into an explanation of John's visit and his startling revelations. As I spoke, I watched their reactions carefully. Terrence's eyes widened in disbelief, while Susan's fingers flew over her keyboard, no doubt already digging into John's background. Luther remained impassive, but I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. So, I concluded, holding up the USB drive, we have a potential goldmine of information here, but we need to verify it before we make any moves. Susan held out her hand. Give it here. I'll run it through every security check I've got before we even think about plugging it in. I nodded, tossing her the drive. Good. Luther, I want you to dig into John's background. Confirm his story, find out what he's been up to these past 2 years. Luther grunted in agreement, already pulling out his phone. And me? Terrence asked, his voice tight with anticipation. I met his gaze steadily. I need you to keep an eye on Shelley and Brandon. After last night, they're bound to be making moves. I want to know every conversation, every meeting, every panicked phone call. As my team set to work, I felt a surge of energy. This new development could be the key to destroying Shelley and Brandon once and for all. But a small voice in the back of my mind whispered a warning. Could we trust John? Or were we walking into a trap of our own making? Days passed in a flurry of activity as we worked to verify John's information and integrate it into our plans. The evidence he provided was damning emails discussing how to deal with John, financial records showing the systematic draining of his accounts, even a recorded conversation where Shelley and Brandon laughingly discussed John's unfortunate accident. We were on the verge of making our move when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Frowning, I answered. Mr. Norton, a distorted voice crackled through the speaker. I have information you need to hear. About John Reeves. I felt my blood run cold. Who is this? A friend, the voice replied. One who doesn't want to see you fall into a trap. Check your email. You'll find proof that John isn't the ally you think he is. The line went dead. With shaking hands, I opened my email to find a single message with an audio file attached. I pressed play, and John's voice filled the room. Once Norton's taken care of Shelley and Brandon, we move, John was saying. He's done all the heavy lifting. We just swoop in, take the evidence, and use it to our advantage. Norton takes the fall, and we walk away with everything. I sat back, my mind reeling. We'd been played. John had used us, counting on our desire for revenge to do his dirty work. But he'd underestimated me. I called an emergency meeting, laying out what I discovered. The team was shocked, but quickly rallied. What's the plan, Ray? Terrence asked, his voice hard with determination. A slow smile spread across my face. We give John exactly what he wants, and then we turn the tables on him. Over the next few days, we set our trap. We leaked information, making it seem as though our plan against Shelley and Brandon was coming to fruition. All the while, we were building a case against John, using his own evidence against him. The night of the supposed takedown arrived. I met John in a dimly lit parking garage, my heart pounding with anticipation. Is it done? John asked, his eyes gleaming with triumph. I nodded, handing him a file. It's all here. Everything we have on Shelley and Brandon. They're finished. John grinned, flipping through the pages. Excellent work, Norton. I knew you had it in you. Just one thing, John, I said, my voice deceptively calm. Did you really think I wouldn't find out about your little plan? John's head snapped up, confusion and then fear flashing across his face. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone, playing the recording of his betrayal. John's face drained of color as he listened to his own voice detailing his scheme. You see, John, I said, advancing on him, you made a crucial mistake. You assumed I was driven solely by revenge. But I'm smarter than that. I always have a backup plan. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. John's eyes darted around, looking for an escape. It's over, John, I said, my voice hard. The authorities have everything. Your plot against me, your involvement in Shelley and Brandon's schemes. You're going down with them. As the police cars screeched into the garage, John made a desperate lunge at me. I sidestepped easily, watching as he was tackled to the ground by officers. Raymond Norton, a detective, approached me. We'll need your statement. I nodded, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over me. Of course, detective. I'm happy to cooperate fully. The weeks following John's arrest were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media frenzy. Shelley and Brandon, implicated by the evidence John had provided, were arrested in a dawn raid that made front-page news. The sight of them being led away in handcuffs, their perfectly crafted facades crumbling, was something I'd never forget. As the dust began to settle, I found myself in my office, staring out at the city skyline. A knock at the door roused me from my thoughts. Come in, I called, turning to see Elizabeth enter, a tentative smile on her face. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said, closing the door behind her. I just wanted to see how you're doing. I gestured for her to sit, feeling a warmth I hadn't experienced in years. Not at all. It's good to see you, Elizabeth. We talked for hours, about the case, about the future, about everything and nothing. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I realized something profound. The anger and bitterness that had driven me for so long were gone, replaced by a sense of peace and possibility. "Elizabeth," I said, meeting her eyes, "would you like to have dinner with me?" Her smile lit up the room. "I thought you'd never ask." As we left the office together, I felt lighter than I had in years. The long nightmare was over, and a new chapter was beginning. Shelley, Brandon, and John would face justice for their crimes, but I was no longer defined by my quest for revenge. I had survived, I had triumphed, and now, with Elizabeth by my side, I was ready to embrace whatever the future might hold. Walking out into the warm evening air, I took a deep breath, savoring the sense of freedom and possibility. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it might lead. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.